Vaush, a controversial for no particular reason guy on the internet. All the time, he talks about internet culture and politics. I would pretty much say that's his area of expertise most of the time. He found a piece of legislation which really disappointed me. It's out of Utah, which doesn't surprise me given what he's about to talk about. And I want to point out that Australia already went through this. And all we need to do is look at Australia, like we have failed to do when it comes to guns, and find the answer for how to deal with it. But if you want to know what I'm talking about, why don't we just have Vaush say it? Let's look.
The Arizona Supreme Court has ruled that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's Mormons, can refuse to answer questions or turn over documents under a state law that exempts religious officials from having to report child sex abuse. If they learn of the crime during a confessional setting. That's great. Love that specific state law, by the way. That's great. Wonder who lobbied for that law when that got put out. Oh yeah, this has always been a thing. Yeah, and it's not good, in my personal opinion. I think that the standard should be the case, with it's the same as like with teachers or whatever, right? Or with therapists. If you say to a therapist, I feel bad because I shoplifted, that's a crime, but they don't have to report you for that. However, if you say to a therapist, planning to hurt someone, hurt some kids, whatever, therapist has to report that because you're indicating there's a threat of you hurting people in the future. The laws on disclosure are a bit more specific than that. I'm not an expert on them, but I gotta say, I really don't like the sentence, state law that exempts religious officials from having to report child abuse if they learn of the crime during a confessional setting. I don't like that sentence. I'm not a fan of that sentence. I don't think it's a great sentence. It's not the best sentence I've ever read. It's actually probably pretty close to one of the worst sentences I've ever read.
Hell of an interesting guy. Yeah, what he said right at the beginning, that's it. That's the core of it. I don't think you should need a degree to have a professional position of trust where people are allowed to trust you with information and you have a legal right not to disclose that information. To be clear, I just want to be crystal clear. However, right at the beginning, and blessedly so, Vaush has made the argument that I think needs to be made. That we understand how the rules for this are supposed to work. If somebody is confessing to you about something they did, fine. But if somebody is confessing to you something that they might do, that you have reason to believe they are going to do, you don't just lose your protections. You have an obligation to report it. In other words, take it to the cartoonish extreme. Somebody says, Father, please forgive me. Tomorrow I'm going to kill a mall full of people with a fertilizer bomb in my van. Okay, the priest has to go report that. The therapist has to go report that. The doctor has to go report that. Because it's not just about the person then. It's about other people. You don't have a right to ensure that other people will be victims. Mormons are famous for this. In fact, Australia, Mormon telltale. But really weird that I'm having so much trouble pulling this up. Well, regardless, in Australia, I'll pull this up for you another time, but the actual clip, I suppose we don't need to watch it. But it comes down to this. In Australia, Mormons originally had those kinds of protections, and they got them removed. Why did they get them removed? Because it was discovered that the church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, was doing the exact same thing that the Catholic Church does. They would find out that a member had been a diddler, and they moved them to different congregations rather than report them to the police. And when the police asked asked if these people had been caught doing things, or if the church had records of people who had done this, that, or the other thing, they interfered with the investigation. They did have records, and they destroyed them. First they refused to turn them over, then they destroyed them. And so as a result, they lost their protections. And when they lost their protections, guess what? A whole bunch of sexual predators were found. And it was found that, yes, when they moved them around from congregation to congregation, the behavior did not stop. It's not good that this law was passed in Utah. I would say that Utah was uniquely vulnerable to this, given that it is basically the biggest Mormon hangout in the U.S. But we should not be allowing this to happen. And after the child abuse scandals with priests, we should have learned better. Of course, this is going to be a big reason to vote blue in 2024. We need federal protections for children in this regard. And it ain't just the Mormons, and it ain't just the Catholics. We're going to do another story, yet another story about what the hell? Let's call it what it is: grooming. And you don't have to take my word for it. It's the actual word of the person involved. Well, let's have a look at that. But first, let's see what the wicked community has to say.